It was August 1858 in the interior of Sao Paulo, during one of the worst droughts in a decade. The Belmont estate baked under a merciless sun. The earth had cracked into 1,000 thirsty mouths, and every breath felt like inhaling fire. Helena, 38 but looking closer to 60, moved bent between the coffee rows, her basket almost as heavy as her body. 2 decades of field labor had carved deep lines into her face and twisted her spine. Her fingertips bled from the sharp edges of the beans. The estate had belonged to the Drummond family for 3 generations. Colonel Antonio Drummond, 62, rarely left the big house. He left the whip work to brutal overseers and the daily cruelty to his 24-year-old twin sons, Bernardo and Baltazar. The twins had never worked a real day in their lives. Bernardo was loud, theatrical, always carrying a small whip more for show than necessity. Baltazar was quieter, colder, observing, calculating, striking exactly where it hurt most. Together, they were the terror of the estate. That suffocating afternoon, they were bored. They had spent the morning drinking French wine on the veranda, playing cards, complaining about the heat. Their father was away in Santos. Their mother, Dona Amelia, remained shut in her chambers. Bernardo spotted Helena first. She had stumbled, spilling half her basket. Beans scattered across the dry earth. "Look at that, Baltazar," he said, pointing with his glass. "Helena messed up again." They descended the steps with the calm arrogance of men who knew no one would ever question them. Helena kept her head down, gathering the beans one by one, knowing any response could be twisted into insolence. Bernardo kicked the basket, scattering the rest. "Now you'll spend all night picking 'em up." Baltazar circled her slowly. "You have a son, don't you? The big one, the deaf one. Daniel, right?" Helena's heart lurched, but her face stayed blank. "Ah, yes, Daniel. Poor thing. Defective." The word landed like a stone. Helena felt something crack inside her chest, but she swallowed it. Daniel was not defective. At 22, he stood 7 feet 2 inches tall. Born deaf after a fever during pregnancy, he had learned the world through vibrations in the ground, through lip reading, through watching eyes. He was strong enough to lift logs grown men could not move. He worked in the sawmill, cut and stacked wood with rhythmic power. But above all, he was kind, carrying loads for the sick, sharing food when someone went hungry. "You should work twice as hard," Bernardo continued, stepping closer, "to make up for your defective son." Helena's eyes glistened, not with sadness, but with helpless rage. "She's not agreeing," Baltazar observed. Bernardo pushed her. Exhausted and off balance, she fell hard. Pain exploded in her spine. The twins laughed. Bernardo placed his boot on her chest. "Stay there until we say you can get up." Nearby enslaved people kept working, eyes fixed on the ground. Looking would invite the same violence or worse. Baltazar crouched beside her. "We can do whatever we want with you. This land, this plantation, you, your defective son, all ours." "He's not defective," Helena whispered before she could stop herself. He kicked her in the ribs, not hard enough to break bone, but hard enough to steal her breath. She curled around the pain. "I didn't tell you to speak," he said quietly. They walked away laughing, leaving her surrounded by scattered beans. It took Helena 15 minutes to sit up, 2 hours to finish gathering, which should have taken 30 minutes. Every movement was torture. When she finally reached the sawmill, Daniel was cutting peroba rosa boards. He felt her footsteps, turned, and the smile died on his face. He dropped the saw and ran to her, enormous hands gentle on her cheeks, reading the story in her swollen eyes and tear-streaked dust. Helena sighed slowly. The private language of gestures and expressions they had built over 22 years. Daniel's fists closed. His body went rigid. He looked toward the big house on the hill. Helena grabbed his arm, shaking her head violently. "No! Danger! Death!" Daniel stared at her a long moment. Love and helplessness warred in his eyes. Finally, he nodded. But Helena knew her son. That nod was not surrender, it was postponement. That night, Daniel stood in the shadows beyond the veranda while the twins smoked cigars and planned. Tomorrow we'd go to the sawmill. We'll have a little conversation with the deaf giant. He doesn't need words. He'll understand a whip, and his mother will understand for him. Daniel read every word on their lips. Something gentle inside him finally broke. The next morning, August 4th, Daniel arrived at the sawmill before dawn. He arranged tools, studied the space, prepared. The twins arrived near 10 o'clock. They found him alone, the other workers conveniently sent elsewhere. "So you're Daniel," Bernardo said, stepping close. "The deaf giant." Daniel read the lips perfectly. He stayed still. "Your mother took a fall yesterday. Very clumsy." He poked Daniel's chest with one finger. Daniel looked at the finger, then at Bernardo's face. "Meek as a lamb," Bernardo laughed to his brother. "All that size, useless." That was their fatal mistake. Daniel moved faster than anyone that size should. His right hand closed around Bernardo's throat, lifting him off the ground. His left caught Balthazar by the collar, yanking him back. For a long second, the twins dangled, feet kicking air, terror blooming in their eyes. Then Daniel set them down. Bernardo fell to his knees, coughing. Balthazar stumbled backward. You dared touch me?" Bernardo screamed, voice cracking. Daniel simply watched. The twins ran. Fear quickly turned to vengeful fury. They ordered the overseer, Sebastião, to bring Helena to the central courtyard for public punishment. 20 lashes. The entire estate watched in silence as the whip fell. Helena screamed at first, then only moaned. Blood dripped onto the dirt. Daniel stood at the edge of the circle, tears streaming, body shaking. Every instinct screamed to charge forward, but at the 10th lash, Helena lifted her head, found his eyes through pain, and shook her head fiercely. "No, don't die for me." Daniel stopped. He forced himself to watch every remaining stroke. When it ended, Helena hung limp from the post. Sebastião cut her down. She collapsed. Balthazar spoke loudly for all to hear. "This is what happens to those who forget their place and to the families of those who forget." That night, Daniel sat beside his mother in the quarters while women cleaned her wounds with what little they had. Helena drifted in fever. When she finally woke, she signed weakly, "Not your fault. Theirs. Always theirs." Daniel nodded. Something cold and certain settled in his chest. Before dawn, on August 5th, he moved through the sleeping estate like a shadow. He took rope, a heavy mallet, iron nails, a thick canvas tarp from the sawmill. He entered the big house through the unlocked root cellar, climbed the servants' stairs, avoided every creaking board by feeling vibrations. He found Bernardo first. One massive hand over the mouth, the other pinning him to the bed. Bernardo thrashed uselessly. "For my mother," he mouthed slowly so Bernardo could read it. He bound and gagged him. Then Balthazar's room, the same efficient terror. Daniel carried them, one at a time, to the cellar. He wrapped them together in the canvas like a cocoon, placed pillows inside to muffle sound, and piled heavy grain sacks on top until the bundle was hidden. Before leaving, he removed the gags one last time. He leaned close so each could see his lips in the faint light. "Remember this." Then he was gone. 6 hours later, the household discovered the twins, dehydrated, soaked in their own waste, incoherent with fear. They invented a story of multiple attackers and attempted revolt. No evidence was ever found. Colonel Drummond raged, interrogated, punished randomly. Nothing. After that day, the twins changed. They never approached another enslaved person. They never went near the sawmill. They never spoke Daniel's name. They moved through the estate like diminished ghosts. The enslaved community noticed. No one said it aloud, but everyone understood. Something unbreakable had happened. Helena's back healed slowly, leaving permanent scars, but a deeper wound closed. Her son had stood up without becoming a monster. Daniel remained gentle. He still helped the weak, still shared what little he had. But now an unspoken authority surrounded him. Even armed overseers stepped aside when he passed. He had not killed them. He had done something more lasting. He had forced two men who thought themselves gods to feel helpless for one night. In that single act of measured justice, mercy wrapped in terror, he showed that true strength is not cruelty. It is knowing exactly who you are when the world insists you are nothing. And a deaf man born in chains, 7 feet 2 inches tall, had more humanity in his restraint than the twins would ever possess in all their inherited violence. On the morning of August 5, 1858, the sun rose over Belmont Estate. In one small, irreversible way, the world was different.